And now we're going to enter into the world of authors and experts. And every Wednesday we have a very special guest. And today we have G.L. Gooding. His first name is Garry, so I will be calling him Garry. That's G.L. Gooding. He is an Irwin Award-winning author, highly praised novels that have intriguing tie-ins to some popular stories that most of us already know. Of course, Garry's first book, Fresh Snow on Bedford Falls, has an unusual connection to the classic movie we all watch every year at Christmas. I watch it maybe 2 times at least. It's a Wonderful Life. And his second novel, Yellum, tells the untold backstory of the resilient donkey that carried Mary to Bethlehem. Both of Garry Gooding's books have Christmas ties, but neither of them are about Christmas, and that's what makes this so intriguing. So why don't we get started, because I'm anxious to talk to G.L. Gooding is his book name, but his first name is Garry, so let's get started and let's say hello to Garry. Hi, Garry. How are you today?
Fine. Thank you so much for having me back. I timed last time, so I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Yes, and it's wonderful to have fun on the radio, on the podcast. It's fun to get to know people, not just to sell a book, but also to allow our audience to get to know you, and that endears them to you as well, so they understand why you wrote your books. Right?
Right. Absolutely.
Garry, most people think that the book, Fresh Snow on Bedford Falls, is linked to a Christmas story, and I find it so interesting that it really doesn't do that. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about why you wrote Fresh Snow on Bedford Falls and it's linked to It's a Wonderful Life?
Well, I, like you, watched that movie. I've watched it all my life. I'm not a youngster anymore. And early on, I just had this nagging interest or desire to maybe think about what might have happened to those characters after the movie ends. Most people have seen it. I'm surprised sometimes when I run into people who haven't. But the story ends very uplifting and very joyous, but it leaves a lot of things unresolved that, being a realist, I'm always wondered what really happened when the dust settled and they came back to find out where the money went. That was catalyst for the dramatic conclusion of the movie. So I picked that piece up, and Potter has always been, Henry Potter, the antagonist in the story, has always been intriguing to me, mainly because he's probably the only character other than his silent assistant who isn't uplifted at the end of the movie. So it's always had a burning thought in the back of my head, and I started writing. And I think I may have described the last time we talked that it started out like a sculptor with a hunk of stone and a little concept about what you want it to turn out to be, and lo and behold, a couple of years later, it came out the way it did and surprised me.
Well, this is going to surprise everybody because no one really actually thought about a extension of the story, It's a Wonderful Life, but you. So that's fantastic. And your book is really a historical mystery, and it takes place after Christmas. So what was happening at that time in America?
Well, the movie ends at the very end of 1945, the end of World War II. We have a new president, relatively new president, with the death of Franklin Roosevelt. Truman's the new man in charge, which creates a lot of interest, in some amazing events followed his path during his time in office. And it was an uncertain time, not because of the war anymore, but what was going to happen to all of the people coming back from that war? What were they going to face in terms of reentry into the work life? And so there were a lot of things hanging in the air, and yet it was still much more a first half of the 20th century lifestyle and experience than after the 50s with the explosion of so many things that changed our lives, some in good ways, some in not so good ways. So it was an interesting time, and I think it was one of the things that helped to endear the movie to the audiences is so many, when it first got real exposure, those experiences of the war and the other difficulties in living life were as fresh in their minds.
True. That's a very good point. And, you know, what's interesting, too, is the movie also depicts that American life was a traditional family, traditional marriage, and the family unit and going to church and honoring God and all those the standing up for the flag and the national anthem, despite the fact that many Americans lost family members, sons, husbands, and friends and so forth during that war. Americans were honoring the military, and they were also so grateful to have their loved ones come home, and there was still that respect. So I really like the fact that you honed in on that. So what is the mystery, though, really about?
Well, I think that the book starts off fairly simply with someone who's investigating and trying to figure out what happened to the money and who was responsible. Of course, those who've seen the movie will know that truth, but they won't know how, unless they read the book, they won't know how it gets resolved or how it is brought around, because one of the realities that I thought the Bailey family would face after that event is backlash about they lost $8,000 of our dollars. You know, we may have replaced it, but what happened to it, and how can we trust them? So their integrity and their future was very much in doubt until and unless that mystery was solved. So that was kind of the first mystery, but that evolves us into a search for other truths in the movie. And I appreciated you bringing up the family aspect because without giving away the plot too much, there's a truly family-oriented and the striving to be a family and to be together and put pieces back together after those years. It plays a significant role in the book, and I think in a very uplifting and positive way. So we learn about Potter's past. We learn about things that happened in his past that were contributed to his personality. We deal with some revelations about things that happened into his past and lead up to how those influence the present. So in essence, I think the book has at least 4 mysteries in it, all of them thankfully resolved by the end.
That's fantastic, because the wonderful thing about these classic movies like It's a Wonderful Life is that they never die, because Americans, human beings, will always strive to have that family unit and those people they can trust around them and depend on, which is missing in today's society a lot in fast-paced big cities, I think, and maybe not so much in the states where it's more farming and more small cities and people know each other and they help each other. I think that's missing, and I think these stories have endured millions and millions of people and even the younger generations because they yearn for that. And so your book, Fresh Snow on Bedford Falls, is going to be a wonderful, wonderful take on America, actually, even though it's a fictional story, but it has human interest in these things do happen to human beings. So it's great. And so do we learn some secrets about your favorite characters in the movie?
Well, of course, the person that you'll learn the most about is Henry Potter, and why it was beyond just being in a wheelchair through some circumstance. We find out why he's in the wheelchair, and we find out, however, that there are many other elements in his life that tend to turn him into the dark and unhappy person that he is in the movie. We learn a lot more about George's past and history and evolution up to the present. In fact, we learn things about him that he doesn't know. And then I think one of the things that the reader will learn or have some joy in is seeing how George, I try to present George with a little bit more dimension. You know, it's not always being the happy, jovial, positive person, that he's a human being and he's dealing with some real stressful times, and he manages them successfully, but not necessarily always well.
Yeah, and the other aspect to that original story, It's a Wonderful Life, is that God played a big part in their belief in God, and also the little angel. And so does that play any part, especially the little angel, in your book?
Absolutely. It's also one of the twists in the story, and it's not Clarence, though. Clarence is in the background, but he's definitely. I think I've continued that element into the book that was in the movie, because besides being godlike, and it also helps us to have faith, to believe in things that we cannot necessarily see or feel, and often are put down or ridiculed. But that angel in that movie, the people who love that movie have to embrace the concept, or they wouldn't. It would be just too trite or too contrived for them. So I think that's an important part, and that's why it's in the book, or that element is in the book.
Fantastic. So I know that Fresh Snow is available in large print edition for people with vision issues. So changing the subject a little bit here, why is large print especially important to you?
Well, because when I started writing this book, in fact, right in the middle of writing it, I had some vision issues, but they became much more severe right in the middle of writing the book. I came very close to stopping the writing because it was just too difficult. Without getting into detail, I have blind spots in my eyes and sensitivity to light and dark, so I have a very limited field of vision in the light, and it's a struggle to see typewritten pages. But I was able to get help from an organization that's in Santa Rosa, California, called the Earl Baum Center, where they gave me a lot of technical support about the computer and things I could do on my computer, and help to getting better technology, bigger screens, and so forth. And in the process of that, I met a lot of people with vision issues, many of them more severe than mine, and that was kind of a motivator just to take the book and create the large print version, not only for those people, but frankly, the older generation reading becomes more difficult as we get older. And I know my mother, up to her passing, was always reading large print books, so that was the motivation.
That's fantastic. I think it's important because a lot of people who are elderly still like to read, but it is difficult to read the small print, for many people, not just the elderly, but many people actually who have problems with their vision. So
right.
How does this vision challenge impact your writing?
Well,
Is
it makes
difficult?
it take longer. It makes it take longer, and I'm still developing the skills to overcome some of those issues that I've mentioned. But thanks to updated equipment, I have a larger screen. I can blow things up. I still laugh at some of the things I read back because I think I typed them correctly, and my vision certainly didn't allow that to be the case. The best thing that I now do is I have the computer read my work back to me after I've gotten it to a point where I think it's reasonably good, and I just listen to the sound, and I can actually now pick out missing letters, wrong letters, things that are definitely not written as well as I would like them to be. So that has really helped to accelerate my ability to write. It's probably why I've written several other works since we last talked. So I'm working through it. I feel I got the gift from my mother.
Well, you don't have to think you're the only one, because I'll tell you, writing is very difficult to find your own errors in writing, and then you'll think it's great, and then you go back and you read it again, and you're like, oh my God, I wrote that. I actually posted it, and I have to redo the whole thing. I'm like, oh my God, they must think I'm an idiot out there,
Right.
And because I'm a multitasker too, so I'm always in a hurry, and
right.
I shouldn't do that.
Oh, you sound like a kindred spirit.
I'm sure I am. And so your second book, Yellum, let's turn to that. It also has a tie to Christmas, but the entire adventure story really happens exclusively outside of the Christmas holiday. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true. It's and it's very different than Fresh Snow. Obviously, starting with the fact that the main characters are all animals, so that's a major difference.
So it is a story about a donkey with a divine purpose, and it began creating for your son when he was a little boy. Is that right?
Yes.
That you began
yes.
creating it for your son, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So how long is the book, and tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, it opens with the donkey being basically alone in the world and striving initially to survive, and along the way running into some people who weren't too kind to him, caring about him, and in order to survive, he kind of became callous and resisted authority and control, and got a very bad opinion of humans and many of the other animals that he was required to associate as he made his travels in his early years. His life started to change when he met a dog and a camel, and together they complete a lengthy journey, part of it together, and then they're broken apart again and come back together at the conclusion. And along the way, I think hopefully the reader will learn, as Yellum the donkey learned, about forgiveness and acceptance and trusting again, and having that reinforced by having better things happen to him, and prepare him for that special job that he's got in store for him.
Oh, I love that story. That's fantastic. And so I heard also through the grapevine that you have 2 new books planned for later this year. And so why don't you tell us about that?
Well, Fresh Snow is my first book, and I've always been a writer, but I haven't been an author very long. So I'm trying different genres and working on things that I've enjoyed reading. First one that's actually completed and it's in editing is a murder mystery. So it's definitely not around the Christmas season. And
although murders do happen, then
that's true.
Didn't get the right gift or something. Bad things can happen.
Yeah, I'm trying to write a book that puts together some interesting characters in a group of vagabonds who are searching for their the meaning of life per se during the Vietnam era. I'm a Vietnam vet, so of that era. So
thank you for your service.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank everyone for their service who's out there now, especially without having maybe the level of support they should. But I digress.
Exactly. I agree 100%.
Anyway, this is the main character is a man who comes back from Vietnam with a lot of wounds and scars, and both at home and away, and decides to go on a road trip. A bunch of his friends work their way in to the trip, and they end up with a plan to go out and spend chunks of time, half years, in different parts of the country, and just live, get part-time jobs, do that kind of thing. And first place they land, son of a gun, this guy ends up helping to investigate, along with his friends, helping investigate a string of murders associated with events in this small town from the past. He happens to be a former military policeman, so he has some investigatory skills. But the story, from my perspective, my goal was to write a story where you have a lot of good character interaction. I have a sense of humor, so I'm trying to, put some humor into it, but at the same time write intriguing story. And that's the book that should be out next. And I hope it's a series, because I'm partway into the second one already. So
sounds exciting.
From your lips to God's ears.
It sounds exciting and thrilling, and like a TV series for sure. And so now that we come to the end of our interview, which I've thoroughly enjoyed and our audience has too, I'm certain, how do they find you online? Do you have a video? Do you have a website? Or how do they purchase your books? It's a Wonderful Life and Yellum. And also any message you'd like to give to our audience is fine, about yourself or your books.
Well, they can reach me at glgooding.com. It's glgooding, GOODING .com. They can go there and they can see the book trailer for Fresh Snow, which has had just short of 140,000 views by the audience out there, and they can get the books and get more information about what's coming. And the last message I have, because I talk too much, is my last book that I just completed a draft of is near and dear to my heart. Hopefully someday we'll get a chance to talk more about it, Rose. It's I call it, the working title is Mother's Story, and it's the story of my 103-year-old mother's life. It's a novel, not a biography, but it's a whole bunch of information about what it was like to grow up in a rural community back when there was no electricity, no power, not much, no safety net, and how she rose above it. So that I'm proud of to be pushing forward soon.
Fantastic. And so can your books be bought on Amazon or on a website? How do you sell your books?
It can be bought both Yellum and Fresh Snow can be bought on Amazon. The large print of the Fresh Snow is available there, and as these other works come out, they will be there as well.
Fantastic. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, G.L. Gooding, Garry Gooding, and I look forward to talking to you about your new books as well in the future, very soon, perhaps.
Well, I would love that. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you. You take care. God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.